Transfer student experience.
The transfer student experience.
The transfer student experience.
Let's
do it. Yeah, so I'm an alumni, so I just graduated this past May. I transferred from Orange Coast College, which is located in Orange County, California. And I transferred to USC in the fall of 2018, and I majored in communication at the Annenberg School.
I notice you've got a bunch of movie memorabilia behind you.
Yeah.
Is that in any way related to what you studied?
Yeah, so it's crazy because I feel, when I was at OCC, that really sparked that passion and interest for film. And so I've always been a big fan for film, but obviously for Disney is something I have a big passion for ever since I was young. I grew up with those movies, and I knew when I was in college, I wanted to do something along the lines of being a part of entertainment. But I think it wasn't until I got to USC what I realized exactly what I wanted to do.
Knowing what you wanted to do, what's your sort of career goals? I know you mentioned entertainment, but is it working for Disney? Is it starting your own agency? How does that look like for you?
In terms of, career goals, I kind of started off with an internship in marketing at Paramount Pictures, and that kind of kicked off everything. And I did that my junior year. It was the summer between my junior to senior year. And that kind of gave me the introduction to the film industry. And it was one of the best experiences just being at Paramount Pictures and kind of learning the many departments there is. And most importantly, the industry and the connections that there is. I got to meet so many people within Paramount, but it's crazy because I feel like the industry is so small that they introduced me to people that worked at Universal and then at Disney. And it's as if people jump around studios, to get experience. And so it was very interesting to learn about that and to, I guess, realize and to know that it's important, to always be professional with whoever you meet, whether you're meeting an executive assistant or whether you're meeting an SVP, it doesn't matter who you meet, but to have that professionalism and to always work, it's so important. And I think that's just something that I've learned, and it's really helped me, I feel, kind of get the future roles that I've gotten throughout the past 2 years.
And so, looking back, what are some classes that you found challenging initially, but ended up being really rewarding once you finished them?
Definitely. I would probably have to say the classes that I found probably hard were definitely the GE classes. For example, I took this class, it's called Language and Society, and it was such a fascinating class. And it wasn't even a class for my major. But I think what was so important was that the skills that I learned in that class, and I think just the discipline it took me, that this isn't going to be an easy class for me, but I learned so much about that class and just going to his office hours. I think ultimately, because I took that my first semester at USC, that prepared me for the next 3 semesters, how to discipline myself. This is how it's going to be at USC. It's a different level. My first exam, I'm never going to forget this. And I say this with pride, but I failed my first exam ever at USC. And I remember I thought I was like, oh my goodness, I'm not capable of being here. I transferred in. This is my first class ever, and it's going to be a complete disaster. And so after that, and after kind of reflecting the next week and talking to my professor and realizing it's going to be okay, I just got to keep going and just kind of seeking that help and really studying and talking to the people around me. That's when I got to meet the people in the transfer committee. And that's where I got to meet people that were in the same class as me that I didn't even know. And just connecting with them and having study group sessions with them. That's when I really began to get the ball rolling in that class and ultimately get the grade that I wanted at the end of the semester. So that class specifically really helped me kind of find my people within the transfer community and also discipline me to prepare myself for what was to come at USC.
Well, it's good that the class had the double benefit of making friends as well as expanding your knowledge.
Exactly, I agree.
For sure. What was the most difficult part of getting initialized as a transfer student?
This is a great question. I think definitely coming in as a transfer student, it gets kind of intimidating just because when you meet people, current students that have started at USC since they were freshmen, you always hear that they're in their second or third internship, or they're double majoring or triple majoring, or you hear the USC admissions tour guides talking about all the different majors they're doing it. As a transfer student, you feel like you've just been dropped off in the middle of the ocean and you're just in this school of fish that you're just trying to fit in. And so I realized, I think the biggest thing I learned is, number one, not to compare yourself to the people around you. Instead, let that be energy and fuel to get you kind of in the right mindset to prepare you for like, okay, maybe I need to start looking for internships now. But definitely don't let that affect the way how you do your thing or you run your thing, because everyone has their own unique path. That's extremely important to know. Everyone, has a goal and they're going to go through their own obstacle courses. But as long as you know what you want and how you're going to get there, that's all it's going to take. And so I think that's the biggest thing, just definitely not to compare yourself, just focus on yourself and just know that it's all going to work out and everything happens for a reason.
Trust the process.
Right, exactly.
I'm curious to know what communication challenges you faced at USC. I would like to know what a student organization could do to make your life as a transfer student better, or could have done.
Yeah, for sure. I'll start with the first question. I think definitely, and this isn't really news, but I think it's clear to say as transfer students, USC doesn't really have a transfer center for transfer students in which they focus a lot on transfer students. And I feel there's just kind of this blend with like us being with the other students. But I wish there could be a way where USC can really focus on putting more attention to the transfer students, right? Just because, number one, we have a different experience, right? We got to USC differently than how, other students got in after high school. And so we obviously have a different route. And I think it's important for us to have that attention, that space, I feel is so important too. If there was even a building, right? Or just a place where transfer students can hang out. I feel that's so crucial and important in the beginning of the process of starting at USC, just to, number one, find the foundation of our friends. And I think most importantly, to find out what really we want to do with our lives. I think that's the whole reason why we go to college. We try to figure out what we want to do. And I think just hearing experiences from other students is so important. And so I think kind of to echo off that idea to the organization that I was a part of when I started at USC and you're currently leading, what would be awesome is this, what you guys are literally doing right now. This is amazing. I don't think we've ever done anything like this, or correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is awesome because, number one, we get to hear from past alumni students or current, whatever it is, but just hearing their experiences and how they manage to go through the whole transfer process is so important. And whenever you guys will get back on campus, I think it's so important to just get current students in the industry, right? From whichever industry they're in business, comm, film, engineering, get that alumni and bring them over to speak, because it's so important just to hear them out. Another important thing too is, I remember Nick did this, I believe, but just getting the team together. I know we don't have a building. I really hope Carol Folt manages to, get a budget for us to get a building, to build something just for the transfer students. But I guess in the meantime, what you guys can do is pull off events that maybe you guys can hold for transfer students, really engage, and definitely weekly trying to update each other of what's happening with everyone, right? Because I feel the less communication there is, the less focus the whole team will have, but the more, the weekly checkups, like how's everyone doing? And I know everyone gets really busy. Everyone's doing all their internships, the clubs, everything. Totally get it. But I think, even if it's just 30 minutes for a checkup, how are you guys doing? What's up? How can, we help each other out? I think that goes such a long way. I guess for me, being a comm major, the most important thing is communication, right? With your team. If you have a solid communication with your team, it really does go a long way for sure.
100%, regardless of what it is. I think it just comes down to constant communication, and more importantly, communication with relevant people who have been through the same thing.
Once again, just what you're doing right now with this whole thing is just, amazing. And you're taking the time to think creatively and do this podcast. And I think it's just such a terrific way to really engage with transfer students.
What did you feel made you stand out in your transfer application? Or maybe a better question would be, what's a point about yourself that you really tried to drive in your essays?
I guess I have two things. Number one is, I think what made me stand out is the amount of research I I did in my application. And the research that I found at USC within Annenberg, I put that research in my application. And I talked about these are the professors that I want to be in their classes with, right? And I name dropped, 3 different professors, and I told reasons why I want to take these classes, but more specifically, why those classes will help me in the long run. Because I feel ultimately it's so much of I want to go to USC because of X, Y, and Z. But I think really the secret, or I guess there's no secret, but for me, I felt what really made me stand out was I talked about it's one thing to go to USC, but this is what USC will bring to my career. Having USC on my resume and meeting the people at USC is going to really help me thrive in the career I want to go towards. And so I think definitely doing that research is so crucial and important. Name dropping professors, putting stats in, I think that's really what made me stand out in terms of Annenberg. And the second thing that I'm sure people are so tired of hearing, but it is so important, and yes, it is cliche, but I'm going to remind everybody else again, is to really be yourself. I think that's so important. And I remember everyone kept telling me that, and I really didn't understand it until the process of actually doing it, right? You keep hearing okay, everyone's telling me to be myself, but I just want to get in, and what does that take? And really, when you start typing on that essay about why you want to go to USC, you really have to talk about yourself in terms of what do you want to do, right? And for a lot of people really don't know what they want to do. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I think what's important is if you talk about what your interests are. For me, I talked about how I have a passion for films, and yet I was applying for Annenberg, right? I wasn't necessarily applying for the film school, but I talked about my passion for films. I talked about that I loved running. Running is one of my biggest hobbies that I love to do, and I love the great outdoors. I talked about why that's so important to me, and that was just because it was just me, right? I wasn't trying to necessarily talk about what I think USC would think would be great. It was more so, this is who I am. I'm just going to be the best of me. And if USC really likes that, then they'll take me. And so I think ultimately just really breaking it down and really talking about what are my interests in life? What do I love to do? And what do I hope to be doing, right? Kind of talking about what are the goals that I want to do. Just to echo off again, it's totally fine if you don't know what you want to do, because that's completely normal. Literally 95% of the time, nobody knows what they want to do. And so it's just important, as long as you talk about yourself and you're honest and you're authentic and you don't compare yourself with anybody else, that's really going to show on your application, and that's really going to stand out for sure.
Just authenticity and being unique.
Right, exactly.
That's what they definitely look for. And the admissions officers can tell when it's a canned response, when it's not you.
Exactly. Yeah, they can, after they review thousands of applications, they know truly which ones really are the ones that these are the people we want.
For sure. Coming up on my end of my degree, I look back and I'm thinking, geez, time has flown by, and it's going to be soon when I graduate and have to start looking for work and getting into the job market. And so, can you share maybe whether it be tips or advice or even something that you're struggling with now or had struggled with in terms of being a transfer student and looking for work after college?
Let me tell you, that is something I am currently struggling with right now, but it's okay. And I will get to why it's okay. But I think most importantly, because college gets us in such a routine, right? And such a structure that we have classes, or we're in internships, or we're in an RA, or we're in clubs, we're student worker. We get this idea of kind of being somewhat okay, after college, time to find a full-time job, because that's just, necessarily what the next thing to do is. And obviously this year with COVID, it's been completely different. And I think it's definitely widened our eyes for a bunch of students, especially for the class of 2020, throughout everywhere, in universities, high schools, elementary schools. But more importantly, I think for everyone, it's just so important that this experience with COVID is just a reminder to show us that there will be hiccups in our career. And, we may not get the job right out of college, but just know that it's okay and everything is going to work out. And despite that sounding kind of like, well, that's not really helpful, if you just manage to keep going and don't get those rejections in your head and kind of get you down, let those rejections once again be fuel. Let it be energy to pump you up and get you going for the next role. Because believe me, I've had so many people who have given up at the most pivotal moment of their time. They're like this close to giving up, and I tell them to just keep going. And the next step that they do, they end up getting the job. And so it's just so crazy. And it's just so important and crucial just to remember to keep going, you know? And as cliche as that sounds, you got to remind yourself that, because I think for the people that we see that are successful, we see their successes, but we don't see all the rejections that they've had, right? And so I think without getting to success, you need to fail, you know, a couple of times. That's the only way to do it. The last thing I want to end off with this question, and I guess, you know, tips and advice, the network that you have at USC or the internships that you've done or any little thing that you've done, it's so important to stay connected, because that, I believe, is the future of getting jobs. I have so many people that I've heard got a job through social media, through Twitter, through LinkedIn. They knew this person, or this person knew of another person that was the recruiter. And so it's so important just to really put yourself out there and just to keep those connections on an Excel list, just because you never know when you're going to need them, right? If you end an internship, end it very well with them, because you don't know if 2 years later you're going to need them, right? Or you don't know if recently, if there's going to be a pandemic and you're going to need to talk to your mentors that was a part of your first internship. It's just so important. The world is definitely unpredictable, but as long as you stay connected with the people and you have great energy and you keep going, I definitely think you will get that full-time job.
For sure. And just back to the rejection thing, I think a lot of people take that rejection personally, as if when they get rejected, it's a personal attack on them that they're not good enough. At the end of the day, most of the time, companies got so many priorities and there's so many variables there that it's impossible to tie it down to why you weren't good enough. So,
right.
Yeah.
It's hard. And, you know, I can attest to that right now. I've gotten many rejections, but you just got to keep going, right? That's just the only way that's going to get you through all of this and ultimately make you stronger.
Knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time and give a younger Danny some advice, what would you tell him?
I would say definitely, number one, relax. It's going to be okay. Number two, just know everything that you do in life, everything, no matter what it is, the smallest thing, the biggest thing, just know that everything happens for a reason and it's meant to be a part of the bigger picture of what you hope to become. Whatever that is, your end route, just know that it's going to help you out in the long run. And I think the last thing I would tell myself is that in life, there's going to be a lot of obstacles. There's going to be a lot of hiccups. But once again, let that be motivation. Let that be energy for yourself to do better the next time around, right? Most importantly, too, with the whole success, the idea of success, I feel the people that are successful, they become successful because of the failures they overcome. So I think if I tell myself that, that would be the best thing I could do.
Awesome. Well, what a fantastic note to end it on. Danny, I really appreciate the time that you took to speak with me today. It's awesome to get an alumni perspective on the transfer process. Again, thank you.
Absolutely, Will. And, you know, I just want to say thanks for just
The transfer
inviting me
student
to
experience.
The transfer student
The transfer
experience.
student